Good morning to those who have come early to our session. My name is Gretchen Musicant, and I am a member of the Westminster Social Justice team. And this morning, we're pleased to welcome Leanna Goose and Julia Nerbonne. And we're calling this session Rise and Repair, and you will certainly hear much more about those terms. Julia is CEO of the Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. She brings her skills as an organizer and academic to build a brilliant movement, a vibrant and hopefully brilliant, movement for climate justice in over 400 Minnesota congregations. She has an undergraduate degree in religion and her PhD in conservation biology. She also serves as an adjunct assistant professor in the conservation biology graduate program at the University of Minnesota. Her research focuses on how to create powerful social movements. Between 2011 and 2014, she was the founding director of Min 350. She has also spent over 25 years teaching ethics and sustainability studies to college students at the Higher Education Consortium for Urban Affairs at the University of Minnesota. She's a member of St. Mary's Episcopal Church in St. Paul. When she's not working, Julia enjoys playing Irish fiddle and reading about history. She doesn't always enjoy large crowds, but when there's a message to deliver, you might find her out on the streets. Her almost grown kids are leading their own climate justice campaigns now. It's a family tradition. Leanna Goose is a mother, and she is joining us virtually. And so you'll see she has a very small frame up there, and hopefully we'll have ways to see more of her, but we certainly will hear from her. She's a mother, Anishinaabe student at Leech Lake Tribal College, co-principal investigator of the Protecting Manoomin for the Next 7 Generations research project, and is a co-facilitator and organizer of the Rise and Repair Coalition space. She has worked on linking science to activism in order to help protect Anishinaabe homelands. She believes Indigenous wisdom can help us live in right relationship with the land around us. Leanna strives to help create a world where the next generation can thrive. Now, just taking a minute to do some housekeeping and remind us how things work around here. For those attending in the MyCell room, we have microphones, and so if you have a question, we will bring a microphone to you, knowing that neither our remote speaker nor those on watching remotely can hear you if you don't use a microphone. For those attending on the live stream, please submit your comments or questions to the live stream chat, and we'll monitor that and raise your questions or comments on your behalf. As part of our ongoing effort to promote respectful conversations around concerns in our community, the social justice team has established guidelines for our social justice forum that you see on the screen. This morning, I'd like to highlight the third point. The third point being concise questions. Because our time is limited, we will limit preambles to questions. Please take a minute to review all of the guidelines. And now, before we get started, let us have a moment of prayer. Holy One, God of justice, breathe into us today a spirit of curiosity and humility. Help us engage with mindfulness, following the lead of voices from our community. Guide our speech and our self-awareness so that we may honor the divine in all people. Amen. Now, I'd like to hand this over to Julia and Leanna.
Good morning. All right, can you hear it well enough online? All right. So Julia Nerbonne, thank you for having me this morning. At Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, we like to start our presentations with a land acknowledgement. And I understand that you here at Westminster have been working on a land acknowledgement. I thought I would share ours so you can just breathe it in. This was written in conjunction with some folks from the Black Visions Collective and in conjunction with people within our Anishinaabe relatives within our broader group. I just want to acknowledge that because I think that it's important to know that land acknowledgements are always contextual and place-based. And we're obviously right here on Dakota land in the Twin Cities. So here's the land acknowledgement. So wherever you may be, let us acknowledge that we are all on Indigenous land. Minnesota is located on the traditional and contemporary homelands of the Anishinaabe and Dakota peoples, the original stewards of this territory. We are committed to uplifting the names of these lands and the community members from these nations as we pursue a right path together. We acknowledge the trauma that is deeply embedded in the foundation of this country. The land we reside on came under control of the United States through genocide, slavery, and ongoing occupation. We recognize the deep historical, spiritual, and personal trauma that has impacted Indigenous communities, communities of color, and immigrant communities. And by offering this acknowledgement of trauma, we affirm the right of people to bring their whole selves and stories into this space, and we affirm our intention to promote healing, respect, and love. All right. So I'm the director of Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. And we're really excited to be part of a movement family of organizations underneath an umbrella called the Climate Justice Commons. And as part of that Climate Justice Commons, Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light has been integral to the creation of the Rise and Repair Alliance. And I'm going to turn most of this presentation over to Leanna online, who's going to talk about the Rise and Repair Alliance. But I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light because it's the faith-based wing of this movement umbrella that we are part of, the Climate Justice Commons. So MNIPL works in partnership with multi-faith communities and all Minnesotans to create a just and sustainable world. Together, we build transformative power and we bring the lights of people's unique gifts to addressing the climate crisis. I'd like to remind people that when we think about climate, clearly that's one of the major issues that's facing our world when we think about the droughts and the wildfires and the tornadoes and what happened in North Carolina. And as Leanna will talk about some of the threats to wild rice, we have a huge problem and it's quite physical in our midst. But really, this is a problem that has to do with the root cause of how people have related to each other and to the earth. So one of the reasons I'm most excited to be deeply invested in the Rise and Repair Alliance is that it gives us an invitation to think differently about how we relate to the earth. And as we think about solutions to the climate crisis, we're not just grabbing for the easiest technological solutions. We're thinking about the deep social, relational solutions that we need to create in order to be able to co-create the kinds of physical world that we need. I also wanted to begin by just inviting you all to think for a minute about why you might be in this world of social justice. You have chosen to show up on a Sunday morning at a social justice forum. Why are you yourself sitting here? What in your history or your story has given you that energy this morning? And I guess I wanted to begin just by telling you about a time when I was a child. Many of you have been to, I'm sure, Lake Superior. Who has been to Lake Michigan amongst us? Some people have traveled over there. I grew up on the shores of Lake Michigan, and every summer I spent the summers with my mother's family in a little community on the western side of Michigan, the eastern side of Lake Michigan, and in the middle of August, we had to get in the station wagon and return home to get back to school. And, over the previous months, I had, sort of run free in the woods and along the shores of Lake Michigan and playing in some of the inland lakes over there on the western side of Michigan. And it would be leaving day, and we'd get in the car, and we always sort of drove by various beaches and places and sort of waved goodbye. And I remember having just this sense of incredible loss. It was the one time as a child that I sort of really cried as we left this beloved place. And I think more and more as an adult about the kinds of emotions that I need to pay attention to. There were all sorts of challenging things that happened in life, but this was a time where my connection to both family and to the land and to the water came through my bones, into my head, into my heart, out my eyes. And as I leave the lake today with my own children, I don't feel exactly the same way, but I still have that little tug. So I invite you to just think for a moment about a place or a time where you really, really felt connected to the land or to the people that you were with in a way that you had no control over that pull in your heart. I'll just give you a minute to take a breath and think about that time. Would anybody want to share an anecdote, a time that you felt like that? Gretchen is going to bring you the mic. You can just say a word.
Well, I didn't exactly do as you said, but I did think about those things I love so much, the Boundary Waters, Lake Superior, and wanting that to be the same for my grandchild.
I didn't grow up around here. I grew up along the Virginia coastline. And so it was different waters, but it was still water and trees and outdoors. And it was a time before parents monitored their children completely. So we would leave with friends in the morning and take off on our bikes, and we could be around the water, we could be climbing trees, whatever. And like you said, I worry that this isn't going to be there for my grandchildren and great grandchildren and future generations because we're making mistakes.
I just want you to hold on to the smell of that salty air, the bicycle, the feeling of sun on your face. I think that as we walk through these days of challenge, keeping those memories and alive, but also making space in our hearts to create those experiences every day, breathing into this beautiful, beautiful world that we live in. Okay, I'm going to move on and mostly hand the screen over to Leanna, but I wanted to just tell you about my experience here working in this climate justice movement over the past decade. I imagine many of you have heard about the Line 3 pipeline. It was approved in late 2020. Enbridge Corporation started construction. Over a little over a year, they constructed this pipeline. It was over 300 miles of pipeline in Minnesota through the wild rice beds and waterways of northern Minnesota, through treaty territory, Anishinaabe land. And this pipeline itself, there was a study that was done that showed that it would emit, it carries 750,000 barrels of oil a day. This is more oil than the entire, if you burn all of that oil that's traveling through the pipeline, it's more oil than the entire state of Minnesota, more carbon than the entire state of Minnesota emits in a year. So basically, because the state of Minnesota permitted this pipeline to be built from the tar sands in the Athabasca region of Alberta through Minnesota, into Wisconsin, down to the refineries in lower Michigan and around Chicago, and then to be exported mostly to European markets. We now have this carbon footprint of more than the entire state of Minnesota, which is an incredible statement. That's all I have to say, really. But not only did this pipeline make it possible for this oil that Canada had said, no, we're not going to allow you to transport it through our land, right? It's Canadian oil, but the Canadians said, no, we're not going to do that. We did let it come through the state of Minnesota. So the question is, why? What happened in our state process that allowed us to approve and allow a company to build that pipeline with such an incredibly huge carbon footprint? And it's not just carbon, right? We also, during the course of construction, and I don't have the details on this, but there were 5 or 6 major aquifer breaches, some of which, while they were constructing it, there was a breach around Clearwater in near Lake Itasca, and Enbridge company had a permit to have pilings driven into the earth for around 10 feet, 8 to 10 feet of pilings. But they went down 18 feet by mistake. I think they saw 8 and they thought, well, that must mean 18. And what happened is they ruptured a Cartesian aquifer, and for over 6 months, water was flowing from this aquifer out of the aquifer and into the watershed with no repair and no monitoring. The people of Minnesota, this happened in January, the people of Minnesota didn't learn that this had happened until September. So something is going on. We're not hearing what's happening. The administration here has staff on the ground who are tasked with monitoring this. They may or may not have been told by Enbridge. We don't know when, but things have not gone well. So a bunch of us, after the end of the Line 3 resistance was done and the pipeline was in and operational, got together and we decided, let's do this differently. We've got to get to folks at the state level and set things up so that the governor and the agencies in Minnesota are able to do their job and do it well. Part of what had happened during Line 3 was that the Public Utilities Commission had a decision to make, and according to the rules of the Public Utilities Commission, they weren't in charge of being concerned about carbon, so they couldn't make a decision using that metric. The DNR wasn't able to make a decision about water quality because the Pollution Control Agency was the one who did that. So each time a major decision was made, they would pass the buck. And so we're curious about how do we set up a system that will help the people of Minnesota protect the people, the water, and the sacred relationships that we have with Anishinaabe and Dakota people here in a way that will help us all to help ourselves for the future. So in late 2020, together with Honor the Earth, Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light decided we would launch this concept, the Rise and Repair Network. We now call it the Rise and Repair Alliance. But the idea was to understand the past, to heal our relationships, and to figure out how to build this better future together. Over the past 2 years, we've been working with over 25 different organizations who've come together to be part of this effort. Many of these were folks that we worked on the Line 3 fight with, but others have joined us since then. We have had, for example, the Bishop of the Episcopal Church of Minnesota and the Bishop of the ELCA Minneapolis Synod speak at our rallies. We have the Minnesota Council of Churches has helped to promote our work. I think we've spoken at this, several other times here in the Westminster space. So there's lots of faith groups who have stepped up to be part of this initiative, as well as other environmental justice groups throughout Minnesota. And I'll just briefly tell you what we've sort of come up with as we've been working to create this alliance over the past couple years. We now have 2 employees, Leanna and her colleague, Owen Small. Owen is a master at tech stuff and is able to put things online and facilitate meetings. Leanna is our tribal facilitator, liaison, organizer, and spends a lot of time talking with different tribal entities and working in her own community at Leech Lake to make sure that as we think about these solutions, that they're really co-created with people on the ground. So we have 5 buckets of work, and maybe we'll show you what those exact buckets are, but basically we work on truth-telling, we work on specifically Indigenous rights and Indigenous rights and treaty rights work. We work on environmental justice that has to do with making sure that some communities are not impacted more than others. We work on making sure that regulations and state processes are improved. We create a shared calendar so all of these different organizations can work together. And every week we have an announcement of what's happening at the legislature. So we have some folks on the ground following the legislation that's coming up that is involved in these categories of missional work that we do. And we are able to tell people, hey, the bill on land return at White Earth is going to be spoken about in the Agriculture Committee on February 12th. So we'd love to have some members of the Alliance show up and maybe testify or be present or ask questions or send notes in. So we give people the opportunity to link in to these issues without having to follow every issue yourself, which is a really huge benefit for me as I run an organization of faith actors. People say, what can I do? And my answer often is follow the Rise and Repair Alliance, because every week you're going to get an answer to that question, and it's going to be nuanced and it's going to be dialed in. So that having been said, every week at 12:30, if there was somebody from Westminster who wanted to join, we have a rapid response network, which means that if you have a community of people that you can get the word out to, if you show up at 12:30, you can hear the folks involved in those different pieces of legislation actually tell you the story of what's going on so that you can then go and share it with your community. Think of it like a snowflake. There's folks in the middle at the Capitol talking to the people developing the bills. They're going to speak to the people on the Rapid Response Network, and then the Rapid Response Network is going to get the word out to the communities. We send an e-blast out. And then we're going to be inviting people to come out to welcome legislators to the session. I think that's on January 14th. Can you check that, Leanna? And then also we're going to have a mass turnout day. Last year we had over 60 legislative visits that happened on the 6th of March, and we'll be doing that again. We'll have people meeting with their legislators about these issues. All right, there's the 5 buckets. Reparations and sovereignty, climate goals and truth-telling, economic development and just transition, regulatory protection, and environmental justice. Here's some of the regulatory actions that we have been working on so far for 2025. There were a variety of different land back bills that went in front of the legislature in 2024. I'll just tell one story. There's a piece of land that is owned by the state of Minnesota that's within the boundaries of the White Earth Reservation. Nobody really disputes the fact that that was never should have been given back to the state of Minnesota. It was tribal land and it should have stayed in reservation hands. But now it has been managed by the state for many, many decades. And the state every year gets a paycheck from the lumber contracts that they get for this land. And so there's a bill that says we should return this to the White Earth Nation. Unfortunately, the hearing room was packed when this bill came to pass. And when I first heard that, I was like, yes, Rise and Repair Alliance. People are showing up to say we should give land back. Not true. It was packed with landowners, white landowners from White Earth who were sort of repeating racist tropes and worried that if they gave this land back, it would be the tip of the iceberg and they would have to leave the reservation entirely. Anyway, it was clear to us that the Alliance really needs to get involved in organizing people to show up to say there are lots of people, and especially people of faith, who care about right relations and land back. We have electronics recycling bill, and Leanna might talk a little bit about why that's so linked to wild rice and to mining in the north. We have legislation that is specifically focused on the health impacts of different types of polluting entities. So there's a bunch of different mining projects. We're quite worried about what's going to happen under the new presidential federal administration to mining. So the question is, how can we organize ourselves here in Minnesota to make sure that as these questions come up federally, that even if the federal government decides to open up federal land to mining, that we have the kinds of legislation which will stop those projects from happening before they are permitted. So now I'm really delighted to hand this over to Leanna. Leanna, it has been one of the best parts of my job has been meeting you and working with you as you have been all over the state of Minnesota talking about this act and the fate of wild rice. So I'm just going to let you talk about what you're doing, and then we'll come back for questions when this is all done.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you, Gretchen, for inviting me to speak today. So, Uju Nindanawe Maganadu, Leanna Goose, Indigenous cause, Makwanadu Dame, Gasaga, Squadrime Cognidu Jabam. Hello, my relatives. My name is Leanna Goose. My clan is Bear. I am from Leech Lake. And I'm excited to talk to you about the proposed legislation that we would like to move forward this year to protect wild rice and the rights of wild rice. So with the incoming federal administration, there will be threats to our life sources here in Minnesota. And we need to work towards the strongest state protections in this moment to protect Minnesota's greatest resources, water and wild rice. And that's what this project is about, is protecting all that we hold sacred here in Minnesota. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. So Manoomin, or gathering wild rice in Ojibwe language, is a tradition that is central to Anishinaabe and Dakota cultures and traditions. And these are photos of my children. And so this past year, I was able to bring out my daughter to introduce her to Manoomin and the practice that our ancestors have done for generations before us. And she was out there and she was an amazing knocker, and she had a really good time. But the sad thing is that, my daughter, she's ricing on rice beds that are way different than what I knew growing up. They're rice beds that are decreased in abundance over the years, and we really want to ensure that, you know, our children have this cultural practice and tradition and are able to pass it on to their children as well. And we want to look out for, you know, the next 7 generations and beyond, and ensure that they have what they need to survive. And Manoomin and clean water are central to life here in Minnesota. Next slide, please. So what will this mean for Minnesota and Indigenous rights? So protecting Manoomin piscine will protect the freshwater habitat this plant depends upon. Protecting wild rice, a sacred resource, will also mean protecting clean water, which is needed for all of life here in Minnesota. And I just wanted to show this map of the treaty territories, the ceded territories. And this map on the bottom is a map of wild rice lakes. As you can see, wild rice is mainly within the northern part of the state, where Anishinaabe have fought hard to protect Manoomin from extractive industries. And I just want to mention this too, you know, Manoomin used to be found in the southern part of the state, the southern region of the state, where Dakota used to practice these cultural traditions as well. And that is no longer the case. It's no longer found in abundance due to human activities. But I really truly believe that if we work to fix our problems we have created with the water, we can bring back Manoomin to where it was traditionally found and feed the world. Manoomin is an amazing food, and practicing that cultural tradition helps keep our people connected to the land, the air, the water, and our ancestors. Next slide, please. So we are going to work through a series of amendments to existing laws. So each one of these amendments could stand on its own. And the first amendment that we would like to work towards is amending the state grain language to recognize the inherent rights of Manoomin piscine to exist and thrive within the state of Minnesota. And this is important because wild rice is more than just a food source. It is a living being and a crucial part of the ecosystems here in Minnesota. Indigenous people in this region think of wild rice as a relative and understand that this plant is sacred and must be protected. And I just want to speak to what it means to recognize the right of a plant to me. So growing up, you know, my father, he taught me that I was always to show respect to the living beings around me. And anytime I took from them, you know, he always showed me that, you know, we offer a gift, we offer a sema to the plants and animals to show respect and gratefulness to the gifts that they are offering us. As humans, you know, we often forget that without the plants, the animals, and the water, you know, we wouldn't be here. And that's what this part of amending state law is about, is getting all of Minnesota to recognize, you know, that living beings just like us have a right to exist. And that's what the rights of Manoomin is about. And I really truly believe that recognizing the rights of Manoomin can help us navigate the climate crisis and help us protect biodiversity on our planet. So wild rice is central to biodiversity. More than 17 species listed in the DNR's comprehensive list of species of greatest conservation need depend on wild rice. And that is crucial in recognizing that this is a keystone species. It is a species that brings life to all of Minnesota. Next slide, please. Another amendment that we want to work towards is prohibition on detrimental state permitting. And this is crucial because tribes in Minnesota have fought hard to protect wild rice from the pollution and contamination that come with extraction. And these fights have taken time and resources from our people that we will never get back. And just like Julia said, the state of Minnesota, you know, they allowed Line 3 and other pipelines to be put through Manoomin strongholds, and this is dangerous. If those are to leak, it would be detrimental to not only our people, but all people. And we also want to enact this legislation to ensure that water that holds wild rice is not home to detrimental projects. And this will be a profound step in protecting water in Manoomin Piscine for the next generations. So I just want to draw attention to what happened in Cohasset. There was a coal ash water spill. This happened in 1855, treaty territory. 5.5 million gallons of contaminated water leaked into Blackwater Lake, vital habitat for Manoomin. And the sulfate levels there are reading 20 times the state limit set to protect wild rice. And this tragic incident is an example of the urgent need for stricter regulations, as it's not a matter of if something will go wrong, but when. And I also just want to state that there are multiple projects proposed here in Minnesota that could harm Manoomin, and they are in treaty territories. There's the Talon mine, the Polymet mine, and these mines are dangerous to our water and our Manoomin. And these mines are sulfide mining projects, and these projects have 100% failure rate to protect water quality in a water-rich environment. And Minnesota is as water-rich as it gets. So this amendment is crucial to protecting our life sources here in Minnesota, especially as we move into this federal administration where we have these mining projects being put back on the table, like the boundary waters. And it's really crucial that we all stand together to protect Manoomin and clean water. Next slide, please. Another amendment that we would like to work towards to protect Manoomin is pesticide drift prohibition. So pesticides are being applied to our waters in Minnesota to try to control invasive species. And this is trying to fix one problem by creating another. Chemicals do not belong in the waters that feed our people. Certain herbicides have been shown to harm wild rice growth and production. 2,4-D, which is usually used to try to control Eurasian water milfoil, has been proven to harm wild rice growth. Another pesticide that is being put in our water is called copper sulfate, which is being used to try to control zebra mussels. Copper is a heavy metal. Applying this to our lakes is really irresponsible. Sulfate is proven to harm wild rice's ability to uptake nutrients essential for its growth. Wild rice is also able to pull heavy metals from the water, so applying copper sulfate near wild rice beds will create problems for our food systems. And we must have restrictions in place so wild rice can thrive free from harmful chemicals. Next slide, please. And another amendment that we would like to work towards is boating restrictions. So as you can see, this is a picture from Leech Lake, and these are boats driving through the rice bed, creating this huge channel. And so this amendment would provide a restriction that would make it unlawful for boaters to drive their boats through wild rice beds until after ricing season ends. And we acknowledge and appreciate the passion for fishing that countless individuals have across these waters in Minnesota. And our call is not to end boating, but rather to seek respectful coexistence that safeguards critical food sources for both our communities and local wildlife. The impact of boating through wild rice beds has been profound, creating channels like the one you see in front of you that threaten the integrity of these vital ecosystems. Just as we wouldn't allow vehicles to drive through a farmer's cornfield, an act that would be seen as disrespectful and damaging, so too we must apply those same considerations to wild rice beds. These areas are not just natural resources, they are essential food sources for the First Nations of Minnesota and deeply intertwined with our culture, traditions, and way of life. Next slide, please. And this is another thing that we would like to see, protection of wild rice habitat from drainage. So wetlands are indispensable ecosystems in Minnesota, teeming with biodiversity and playing a crucial role in the overall health of our environment. They serve as essential habitat for countless species, filter pollutants, and regulate water cycles. Wetlands are also vital to the health of wild rice beds across our state. And wild rice is particularly sensitive to fluctuations in water levels, and the draining of wetlands threaten its growth and sustainability. Preserving wetlands is not just about protecting a single species, but it is about maintaining the intricate web of life that relies on these ecosystems. And this is a picture of the confluence of Big Sandy Lake and the Mississippi River. And as you can see, it is a beautiful wetland. And I just want to bring attention to one thing really quickly. So the proposed Talon mine is located in this area, the Mississippi River watershed. And they want to mine for nickel, which is wrapped in sulfide. And when that is pulled from the ground, that sulfide ore, it reacts with the air to create sulfuric acid, which has the same chemical composition as battery acid. And this is happening right in the Mississippi watershed, and it could have the potential, to pollute everyone's water downstream. So we must really all stand together. There are things you can do to become involved, to stand with the Mille Lacs and Sandy Lake Band. You can visit waterovernickel.com, and I'll put that in the chat after here. But I really just want to say that, we cannot sacrifice Indigenous homelands to try to create an energy transition away from fossil fuels, something that our people have actively fought against. And I just also want to draw attention to another fact. They say 97% of the nickel needed for the energy transition is underneath reservations or within 35 miles of one. So that is something that truly scares me, and it should scare everybody. We cannot create these mines which have the ability to pollute the land, air, and water to try to create this energy transition. One way that we would like to see within this coalition to sustainably source these metals is electronic waste recycling. So I just gotta drop one more fact out there. So according to one study, the average American generates around 46 pounds of electronic waste every year, and that's a lot of metals. And most of those metals are making their way into our landfills, where they can contaminate the water. And we really got to push for this 100% electronic waste recycling this year. It can source some of the metals needed for the energy transition. And also we keep those heavy metals out of our landfills. So it's all interconnected, all of this work that we're doing. And I really encourage all of you to get involved with this coalition. Next slide, please. This is another protection we would like to see. So protection of habitat from boating channels. So currently, Minnesota law allows lakeshore homeowners to have a channel through wild rice beds. And this is a dangerous concept that could eventually rid our lakes of wild rice as development and expansion continues. So when homeowners create channels to access the water, it often means more boat traffic through sensitive wild rice areas. Boat propellers can rip up wild rice plants. The constant disturbance from boat traffic can also create waves that disturb the roots and seeds of the wild rice. If there's no regulation to prevent this type of damage, it could decimate the wild rice beds over time. As development continues, more and more channels could be carved into the beds, leading to further fragmentation of this ecosystem. With increased lakefront development, this could soon spiral out of control, threatening not just the wild rice beds, but the entire aquatic ecosystem that relies on them. And this is a picture from Leech Lake. As you can see, there is a huge channel that is allowed to be put through the rice bed on Leech Lake. And I understand that like people want access to the lake, and there are other accesses that do not involve driving and ripping up the wild rice beds. And I know this may be a touchy subject for boaters, but I really want to do this in a good way and help them to understand, you know, that we don't have to continue this cycle of destruction. And um, so I think it's going to take all of us to help, you know, um, everyone understand this. And it's going to take having many conversations with our legislators. So I would really love it if we can all get involved this year and work towards these protections for Manoomin and clean water. Next slide, please. And so this is how you can get involved. You can take a picture of this QR code to join the campaign and stand with us to protect clean water and wild rice for the next 7 generations and beyond. And I will also put the I will also put the link to get involved in the chat. And I really appreciate you all listening to me today. And thank you. I really hope to see some of you guys throughout this legislative session. And I hope we all get to work together to create the world that we want to pass on to our children. Miigwech.
Thank you so much. We also have a flyer on our tables that has that QR code on it as well. So if people want to take it home if you don't want to get your phones activated right now. So now we have a few minutes for questions about the many different things we've heard about today or comments, and we'll certainly be interested in hearing from those who are joining us remotely as well. Anything burning on your mind? Oh, excellent. Come right over.
Are there places already available where you can take electronic waste? Like I've got boxes of electronic waste that I have not put in the trash because I don't want to. And I'm figuring that there's got to be some place that they can go, but where is that?
I can answer that question for Hennepin County, where we are right now. So each county, right now, we don't have legislation that, and Leanna, correct me if I say anything that's wrong. I think that I understand. What we are seeking is statewide legislation that would require counties and also, to make this available for everybody. At this point, it's county by county. There are a number of sites in Hennepin County where you can, between, the hours of 8 and 4 or whatever it is, and I don't know the hours, drive your waste. There's a site in Bloomington, for example. And if you have certain things, they will charge you $10 or $15 to recycle that. Other things are free to bring it there. But the point is it's incumbent on you to not only know that you need to put it in the box, but to use your resources to find the site and then also to pay for it to be recycled. We think that it could be much, much easier for people to do this, and it could be required for companies to take those electronics back and do the recycling for us. So yeah, we need to streamline how that happens so that it's not the kind of pain that I've just described to you. Did I say that correctly, Leanna?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, so there is places where you can recycle electronic waste in Minnesota, like Julia just said, but we're pushing for 100%. And thank you for not throwing those electronics in the garbage. I think we all recognize that, they don't belong there. I have my own box that I need to recycle too. So like, I'm like waiting for the 100% electronic waste recycling. And then I feel as though like we all sense that those don't belong in the trash. So yeah, thank you for that. And So
I'll just say one more thing about this. Part of the goal here is to have the scale at which it's going to make a difference industrial, in terms of industry purchasing those recycled products. Like if we don't have the scale of recycling that industry needs to be able to create, for example, fleets of electric cars, it's just going to be piddling around the edges. We need to deliver the kinds of scale of waste that will, make up for not having the Talon mine, for example. The question was, can they reuse the minerals that are in it? Yes, like copper, for example, is there's lots of ways to get copper. One is to dig it out of the ground. That's the most difficult way to get it. It's a lot easier to get it from wires that are simply being thrown in the trash, and in Hennepin County in the incinerator if you put it in your trash. So, the types of things we do right now just don't make any sense, and we can do it better. Next question.
Thank you so much. This is so informative. And I apologize if you talked about this at the beginning since I was a little late, but I wondered if you could share what some of the greatest successes have been over the last couple of legislative sessions.
Great question. I'll say one bill that the Alliance worked on and was central to the work that Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light did was a bill that created a green bank in Minnesota. And it wasn't just any green bank. One of the things that we found is that, there's folks like Elon Musk who have plenty of money. They can invest in all kinds of things. But for a lot of us, we can't necessarily get the capital up front to be able to put solar panels or a geothermal system in. And so we were able to help establish a Minnesota state green bank that will give much lower than market rate loans to institutions who wouldn't otherwise be capitalized to be able to invest in the renewable energy arena. I'll say one more example, and there's 100% clean electricity by 2040 bill, what you may have heard about, that passed in 2023. Huge that passed, and yet there were some weird things that were part of it. One of was that we can define clean electricity as incinerated waste or hydroelectric that ruins community land in Manitoba and the Cree people. So our alliance was really active in saying that as you define what is clean electricity, let's not throw environmental justice communities under the bus. And we were pretty successful at articulating what the line of and the definition of clean electricity would be.
We've reached the end of.
Here, just use this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much. It's been very informative. Unfortunately, we've run short on time. I was reminded of one thing that we do here at Westminster on May 10th. I believe we have a Fix-It clinic. Hennepin County comes and allows you to fix things instead of maybe just throwing them away. I know I had an iron that had a faulty plug, and so they were able to put a new plug on. So my iron still works for me, and I didn't have to put that massive thing into the waste stream. So please join me, and we have 17 people that have been joining us online as well. So join me in thanking our two speakers today. Thank you. So our social justice forums are going to take a short break for Christmas and the New Year holidays. The next forum will be Sunday, January 5th, and we will be welcoming leaders and youth from two innovative programs that provide opportunities for engaging immigrant youth in the community. We look forward to seeing you then.
Thanks, Leanna.
Yep, thank you too.
Great to see you this morning.
Yeah, good to see you too. Gig 'em up, man.